In the heart of Silicon Valley, where innovation and ambition intertwine, Elon Musk sat in his office, lost in thought. It was a rare moment of stillness for the billionaire visionary, known for reshaping industries and dreaming of interplanetary travel. Amid the relentless pace of his life, an unusual idea had taken root in his mind. A conversation with a colleague about human behavior had sparked a question he couldn't shake. How would people treat someone who seemed to have nothing, especially if they had no idea who that person really was? The thought intrigued and unsettled him. Elon, a man accustomed to commanding attention and respect, wanted to step away from the world that recognized him. He wanted to see humanity from the ground up, to strip away the layers of wealth and influence that shielded him. This was not a simple curiosity. It was an experiment, a way to understand how society truly valued kindness, respect, and dignity, qualities he often spoke of in interviews but rarely had the chance to observe firsthand. Weeks of preparation led to this moment. His team, sworn to secrecy, helped craft a disguise that would make him unrecognizable. The transformation was startling. A scruffy, unkempt wig and secondhand clothes from a thrift store replaced his tailored suits. Scuffed sneakers that barely held together adorned his feet. A small makeup team added subtle touches. A few lines here, some shadows there, to age his face just enough to erase the familiar features splashed across magazine covers and news feeds. Standing before the mirror, Elon barely recognized himself. The man staring back at him looked weary, beaten down by life. For the first time in years, he felt invisible, a stranger even to himself. The destination for his experiment was carefully chosen. The Copper Elm, an upscale restaurant nestled in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Known for its exclusivity and catering to a wealthy clientele, it was the perfect place to test how appearances influence behavior. Elon wasn't seeking to shame anyone. His goal was simple yet profound, to observe human nature in its rawest form. Would people see beyond the surface, or would they let assumptions cloud their actions? On an overcast Thursday afternoon, Elon embarked on his journey. As he stepped out of his sleek car, his heart raced in a way he hadn't felt in years. This was a man who thrived on challenges, yet the uncertainty of how he would be treated brought a rare vulnerability. The ride to the restaurant, though uneventful, felt charged with anticipation. The city buzzed around him, oblivious to the billionaire disguised as a man down on his luck. When Elon arrived at the Copper Elm, he paused before the grand double doors, taking a deep breath. The polished exterior of the restaurant gleamed under the soft light, exuding sophistication. Pushing the doors open, he stepped inside, his experiment officially underway. The murmurs of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the warm glow of chandeliers contrasted sharply with his disheveled appearance. For the first time in years, Elon Musk was just another face in the crowd, and the journey to uncover the truth about humanity had begun. Elon Musk stood in front of the mirror, examining his transformation. Gone were the polished suits and confident demeanor that typically defined his public image. In their place was a man who appeared to have faced life's hardest blows. His hair, now scruffy and uneven under an unkempt wig, blended seamlessly with the lines that were carefully painted onto his face. His clothes, a mismatched set of second-hand garments, hung loosely on him, frayed at the edges. A pair of scuffed sneakers, barely holding together, completed the look. The mirror reflected someone unrecognizable, someone society might overlook. His heart raced as he adjusted his wig one last time. Elon had chosen every detail of his disguise with precision, determined to create a version of himself that would blend into the background. This wasn't just an exercise in vanity. It was a foundation for his social experiment. What would happen when the layers of wealth, fame, and influence were stripped away? Would people treat him with the same respect they showed the billionaire, or would they dismiss him outright? The destination for his test was the Copper Elm, an upscale restaurant in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Renowned for its exclusivity and luxurious atmosphere, the establishment catered to the elite. It was a place where appearances mattered, where wealth and status often dictated the service and attention a guest received. To Elon, It was the perfect stage to explore the biases that dictated human interaction. The ride to the restaurant felt surreal. As the sleek electric car dropped him off a block away to avoid drawing attention, he walked toward his destination, feeling the weight of his new persona. The streets of Santa Fe buzzed with life, but to Elon, each step felt like entering a different world. For a man used to being recognized at every turn, anonymity felt both liberating and unsettling. The Copper Elm's grand double doors loomed ahead, their polished surface gleaming in the afternoon light. Elon hesitated for a moment, taking in the restaurant's elegant exterior. Chandeliers cast a warm glow from inside, their light spilling onto the sidewalk. Through the windows, he could see impeccably dressed diners conversing over fine meals, a stark contrast to his tattered appearance. Steeling himself, he pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The atmosphere was intoxicating, a symphony of clinking glasses, murmured conversations, and soft jazz music filled the air. The warm lighting highlighted the intricate decor, from the polished hardwood floors to the ornate chandeliers hanging overhead. Elon's entrance, however, created a ripple of discomfort. Heads turned briefly, diners stealing glances before returning to their conversations. But it was the staff's reaction that intrigued him most. A hostess, dressed in a sleek black uniform, approached him with a hesitant smile. Her eyes darted quickly over his appearance, her professional facade faltering slightly. "Good evening," she said, her tone polite but strained. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," Elon replied simply. "I was hoping for a table for one." The hostess glanced over her shoulder at the row of empty tables, then toward the bar, where a manager stood watching the interaction closely. Her smile wavered. "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked tonight," she said, her voice losing its warmth. Elon noticed her eyes flick to his shoes, the scuffed soles betraying his disguise. She was dismissing him, and she wasn't subtle about it. From across the room, a young server named Sophia observed the interaction. She had only been working at the Copper Elm for a few months, saving up for culinary school. Something about the man's demeanor caught her attention. He wasn't just another wanderer seeking shelter. He seemed deliberate. Against the backdrop of polished perfection, his presence felt like an anomaly. "I can seat him," Sophia called out, stepping forward before the hostess could turn him away completely. The room's atmosphere shifted. Conversations quieted as patrons turned their attention to the scene unfolding before them. Sophia's decision drew disapproving glances from some of her colleagues, and the manager's frown deepened. Elon offered Sophia a faint smile as she guided him to a small table near the kitchen doors. It wasn't the prime spot in the restaurant, but it was a seat, and he was grateful. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Take your time," Sophia replied warmly, placing a menu in front of him. She ignored the whispers that rose among the other servers as she walked back to the kitchen. Elon sat quietly, observing the room. The tension in the air was palpable. Patrons exchanged furtive glances, their curiosity mingled with disdain. A server whispered loudly to a colleague, "What's he even doing here?" Another added, "This is going to scare off the regulars." As the moments passed, Elon's experiment began to take shape. The contrast between his modest appearance and the opulence around him was stark, and the reactions it provoked were telling. The first seeds of his test were planted, and he could feel the lessons beginning to unfold. The hostess's forced smile barely concealed her discomfort as she addressed the man standing before her. His tattered clothing and unkempt appearance stood in stark contrast to the polished elegance of the Copper Elm. She shifted uneasily, her professional demeanor cracking under the weight of her assumptions. "Good evening," she said, her tone carefully polite but strained. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," Elon replied evenly, his voice calm. "I was hoping to get a table for one." Her hesitation was palpable as her eyes darted to the empty tables visible from where they stood. The plush seating and carefully arranged centerpieces mocked her excuse before she could even say it. "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked this evening," she finally said, her words rushed and lacking conviction. From the corner of the room, The manager observed the interaction with a frown, his disapproval evident. Elon, undeterred, nodded and remained where he stood, allowing the silence to stretch uncomfortably. The hostess fidgeted under his steady gaze, her forced professionalism faltering further. Across the room, conversations quieted as diners stole curious glances at the scene. The weight of judgment settled over the room, thick and unrelenting. Before the hostess could dismiss him entirely, a young server stepped forward. Sophia, barely out of her teens and a few months into her job at the Copper Elm, had been watching the interaction with growing unease. Her aspirations of attending culinary school often left her hyper-aware of how people were treated, and something about the man's quiet dignity struck her. "I can seat him," she called out, her voice steady but firm. The room seemed to hold its breath. Patrons exchanged incredulous glances, and the hostess turned sharply to Sophia, her eyes wide with surprise. "Sophia," the hostess began, but Sophia cut her off by stepping forward, her hand gesturing toward the dining area. "Follow me, sir," she said, addressing Elon with a warm smile. Her tone was calm, defying the whispers that had already begun circulating among the staff and diners. Elon followed her to a table tucked away near the kitchen doors. It wasn't the best seat in the house, but it was a seat, and he was grateful. As he settled into the chair, he offered Sophia a faint smile. "Thank you," he said sincerely. She returned the smile, her gaze unwavering as she handed him a menu. "Take your time," she said before turning back toward the main dining area. Her departure was met with hushed murmurs from the other servers, some shaking their heads in disbelief. "What's she doing?" One of them whispered loudly enough for Elon to hear. Another added, "This is going to scare off the regulars." Elon ignored the comments, his focus shifting to the room around him. The Copper Elm's opulent interior felt almost oppressive in its grandeur. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the meticulously arranged tables, their surfaces gleaming under the light. The patrons, dressed in designer clothing, exuded an air of entitlement that seemed to grow more pronounced as they eyed him with disdain. As he studied the menu, he could feel their gazes burning into him. A couple seated nearby leaned in close, their voices low but not low enough. "What is he doing here?" the woman whispered, her tone dripping with contempt. "This is supposed to be an exclusive place." Her companion shrugged, but glanced at Elon with equal disapproval. When Sophia returned to take his order, her demeanor remained professional, unaffected by the judgment surrounding them. "Have you decided what you'd like?" she asked, her tone kind. "Just soup and bread, please," Elon replied, his voice soft but steady. Sophia blinked, momentarily surprised by the simplicity of his request. "That's all?" she asked, her head tilting slightly. "That's all," he confirmed with a small smile. She nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. As he waited, Elon's focus returned to the room. The whispers continued, louder now, emboldened by the supposed anonymity of group judgment. A man seated at the bar snickered, his voice carrying across the room. "Looks like he wandered in from the street." Elon's expression remained neutral, but his mind raced, cataloging every reaction. He wasn't here to retaliate or confront. He was here to observe, to understand the layers of prejudice that surfaced in moments like this. The tension in the room was palpable, each judgmental glance and whispered insult weaving a narrative of exclusion. Sophia returned with a tray, carefully placing the steaming bowl of soup and a small basket of bread in front of him. "Enjoy your meal," she said, her smile genuine. "Thank you," Elon said, meeting her gaze. In that brief exchange, he saw something rare, compassion untainted by bias. She didn't know who he was, yet she treated him with a respect that others in the room lacked entirely. As he ate, the murmurs around him grew louder. An older woman seated across the room motioned to a server, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. "Why are we letting someone like that in here?" she asked, her tone sharp. The server's uncomfortable shrug only added to the tension. Sophia, overhearing the comment, glanced in Elon's direction, Her cheeks flushed, but she said nothing, choosing instead to continue her work. Her quiet resilience struck Elon deeply. She could have easily ignored him, followed the unspoken rules of exclusivity that governed the restaurant, but she hadn't. When Elon finished his meal, he placed his napkin neatly beside the empty bowl and sat back, observing the room one final time. The experiment had revealed much already, but he knew this was just the beginning. For now, he was content to remain in the background, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. The stage was set, and the lessons were just beginning to take shape. Sophia moved through the bustling dining room with the practiced grace of someone twice her age. Balancing trays and taking orders with a calm demeanor, she exuded professionalism. But tonight, she faced an unexpected challenge. Her decision to serve a man in tattered clothing, who sat quietly near the kitchen doors, had stirred up whispers and stares from both diners and staff. Still, she remained unfazed. "Why would you even bother?" A woman's sharp voice cut through the murmurs. Sophia had approached a table where a middle-aged woman, dressed in an expensive evening gown, looked at her with thinly veiled disdain. Her glance flicked pointedly toward Elon, seated alone. "Someone like that doesn't belong here." Sophia's cheeks flushed, but she straightened her back and smiled. "Every customer deserves to be treated with respect, ma'am," she replied, her tone firm yet polite. The woman's lips pursed, but she said nothing more, turning her attention back to her companion. Sophia's response had drawn the attention of nearby diners, many of whom exchanged glances or shook their heads disapprovingly. Yet she continued her work, unfaltering in her resolve. Elon watched this exchange in silence, his spoon poised over the steaming bowl of soup in front of him. He admired Sophia's courage. Her willingness to defend him, despite the judgment she faced, was a stark contrast to the indifference, and in some cases outright hostility, he had encountered so far. Meanwhile, the staff's behavior told a different story. The hostess, who had initially refused him a table, avoided looking in his direction. Her movements hurried as she passed his table. At the bar, two servers chuckled softly, their eyes darting toward him. Elon caught snippets of their conversation. What is he even doing here? And Sophia's wasting her time? The bartender joined in with a smirk, polishing a glass with exaggerated nonchalance. Their dismissive laughter lingered in the air. Despite the atmosphere, Sophia remained unwavering. She returned to Elon's table periodically, checking in with the same kindness she showed every other guest. "Is everything to your liking?" she asked during one visit. "Yes, thank you," Elon replied, his voice sincere. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the quiet determination in her eyes. She was putting herself in an uncomfortable position, yet her empathy never wavered. As the evening progressed, the judgmental glances from the diners grew more pointed. A man seated at a nearby table leaned toward his partner, his voice deliberately loud. "It's a shame this place is letting standards slip," he said, shaking his head. His partner nodded, casting a quick look in Elon's direction. Sophia overheard the comment as she passed by, her tray balanced on one hand. Without breaking stride, she stopped at the man's table. "Is there anything I can assist you with, sir?" she asked, her tone professional but tinged with challenge. The man hesitated, caught off guard. "No, nothing," he muttered, turning his attention back to his meal. Sophia gave a polite nod and continued on her way, her expression neutral. Elon couldn't help but smile slightly. She had defused the situation with grace, refusing to let the man's behavior go unchecked without causing a scene. It was moments like these that cemented Elon's respect for her. She embodied the very qualities his experiments sought to uncover: empathy, integrity, and the courage to act against societal norms. Her actions contrasted sharply with the behavior of her colleagues, who either ignored him or openly mocked his presence. Elon took mental notes, cataloging the subtle ways people's prejudices manifested. In their whispers, their body language, their unwillingness to extend even basic courtesy. By the time Elon finished his meal, the tension in the room had reached its peak. The older woman who had earlier questioned Sophia's decision to serve him was now gesturing toward a server, her voice cutting through the ambient noise. "Why hasn't anyone done something about him?" she demanded, her tone indignant. Sophia, carrying a tray of empty glasses, stopped mid-stride. Setting the tray down carefully, she approached the woman with measured steps. "Ma'am, is there something wrong with your service tonight?" she asked, her tone polite but firm. The woman's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced toward Elon before muttering, "No, nothing," and returning to her meal. Sophia's composure never wavered as she resumed her duties, her resolve unshaken by the confrontation. Elon rose from his seat, leaving the table neatly arranged. He caught Sophia's eye as she passed by, pausing just long enough to say, "Thank you." "Of course," she replied, her voice soft. There was no need for further words. In that brief exchange, they shared an understanding, a recognition of the humanity that had shown through despite the circumstances. As Elon made his way toward the exit, he glanced back at the dining room. The faces of the diners were a mix of embarrassment, guilt, and lingering disdain. But among them, Sophia stood out. She was a beacon of kindness in a space clouded by judgment. Her actions had left a mark on him, one that would shape the next steps of his experiment. For Sophia, the evening was far from over. She continued her work with the same quiet determination, knowing that her decision to act with empathy had set her apart. And though the whispers and stares persisted, she held her head high, knowing she had done the right thing. Elon's presence may have been fleeting, but the lesson he observed and the lesson she lived would endure far beyond the confines of the copper elm. As the final spoonful of soup disappeared, Elon Musk folded his napkin neatly beside the empty bowl and rose from his chair. The hum of conversations in the copper elm faltered, replaced by a quiet unease as all eyes turned toward the man who had been the subject of whispers and judgment throughout the evening. His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on the hostess who had denied him a table, the servers who had chuckled at his expense, and the diners who had openly disparaged him. He took a step forward, the wooden floor creaking beneath his worn sneakers. Standing in the center of the room, he raised a hand, commanding the room's attention. The room grew silent. Even Sophia, who had been clearing dishes near the kitchen, paused mid-stride, her tray balanced precariously in her hands. Elon's voice, steady and calm, broke the stillness. "Before I leave, I'd like to say something," he began. His words hung in the air, laden with a weight that made even the most dismissive diners lean in slightly, curious despite themselves. "Tonight, I came here not as the man you know, but as someone you wouldn't give a second glance to, someone you judged before they even spoke a word." The crowd stirred uncomfortably, shifting in their seats as his words sank in. Elon reached up and pulled off the scruffy wig that had concealed his identity. Gasps rippled through the room as he straightened, revealing the unmistakable face that had graced countless headlines and magazine covers. "Elon Musk?" someone whispered, the disbelief palpable. "Yes," he confirmed, his eyes scanning the stunned faces before him. "I came here disguised because I wanted to see how people treat those they believe to be beneath them." A heavy silence settled over the room. Diners avoided eye contact, their earlier words of scorn and disdain now echoing uncomfortably in their minds. Even the staff, who had once exchanged amused glances, now stood frozen, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt. "What I saw was disappointing," Elon continued, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. "Judgment, mockery, and exclusion, all because of how I appeared." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in before his expression softened. His gaze shifted to Sophia, who stood near the kitchen doors, her cheeks flushed but her posture unwavering. "But one person stood out," he said, gesturing toward her. "Sophia." Her eyes widened as every head in the room turned toward her. She set her tray down carefully and stepped forward hesitantly, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "You didn't know who I was," Elon said, his voice warm now, "but you treated me with kindness and respect." You defended me when it would have been easier to stay silent. That is the kind of character that truly matters. Sophia's face turned bright red as she murmured, I was just doing my job. Elon shook his head. No, you went beyond that. You showed humanity when no one else did. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small envelope and handed it to her. With trembling hands, Sophia opened the envelope to reveal a handwritten note and a check. Her breath caught as she read aloud, Sophia, thank you for your kindness. Use this to pursue your dreams. Culinary school, your own restaurant, whatever you choose. The world needs more people like you. Her voice cracked, and tears streamed down her face as she clutched the check for $50,000. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the room, the earlier tension replaced by a mix of awe and quiet introspection. Elon turned back to the crowd, his expression serious once more. Let this be a reminder, he said, his voice firm. Appearances are deceiving. The way you treat others, especially those who seem different from you, reveals who you truly are. We can all do better. The manager, who had been standing stiffly near the bar, stepped forward, his face pale. Mr. Musk, he began, but Elon raised a hand, silencing him. What's done is done, Elon said, his tone resolute. But let this be a lesson for your establishment. Respect and kindness should be the foundation of any business. With that, he turned to Sophia one last time. Never lose that spark of kindness, he said. It's rare and it's powerful. Sophia nodded, unable to speak as fresh tears welled in her eyes. The room remained silent as Elon made his way to the exit, his footsteps echoing on the polished hardwood floor. When the door closed softly behind him, the diners and staff were left to grapple with their actions and the profound lesson they had witnessed. In the quiet that followed, Sophia stood at the center of it all, still clutching the check. The weight of Elon's words lingered in the air, a powerful reminder of the impact one act of kindness can have. That night, the Copper Elm was not just a restaurant. It was a mirror, reflecting the best and worst of human nature, and a stage where one young woman's empathy had shone brighter than the chandeliers overhead. The news of Elon Musk's experiment at the Copper Elm spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of millions around the globe. Social media platforms buzzed with debates, the hashtag kindness experiment trending across multiple countries. Headlines splashed across news outlets range from Elon Musk tests humanity in disguise to billionaire rewards empathy in shocking social experiment. The event sparked conversations about societal biases, the power of appearances, and the importance of empathy. People shared their own experiences of judgment and kindness, creating a ripple effect of introspection. Comment sections overflowed with opinions. Some applauded Elon's bold approach, while others criticized the need for such an experiment to expose humanity's flaws. Through it all, one name stood out as the hero of the story, Sophia. Overnight, Sophia found herself thrust into the spotlight. Reporters sought her out for interviews, eager to hear her perspective. At first, the attention was overwhelming. Cameras and microphones were unfamiliar territory for the young server who had only been focused on saving for culinary school. But as she adjusted to the newfound fame, Sophia realized she had a platform to share an important message. It wasn't about knowing who he was, she told a journalist during her first televised interview. It was about treating someone with dignity, no matter their circumstances. That's something we should all do. Not just for billionaires in disguise, but for everyone. Her words struck a chord with viewers, and clips of her interview quickly went viral. Meanwhile, the Copper Elm faced its own reckoning. The restaurant's management, humbled by the global attention, implemented sweeping policy changes. Training programs were introduced, emphasizing empathy and respect for all guests, regardless of their appearance. The manager who had stood silently as the staff mocked Elon was replaced, and new leadership committed to fostering an inclusive environment. We've learned a valuable lesson, the restaurant's new general manager stated in a public announcement. We're committed to ensuring that everyone who walks through our doors feels welcome and respected. For Sophia, life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The $50,000 check from Elon allowed her to enroll in culinary school, a dream she had thought was years away. She immersed herself in her studies, her passion for cooking fueled by the knowledge that her kindness had been recognized and rewarded. But Sophia's journey didn't stop there. She used her growing platform to advocate for change in the service industry, partnering with nonprofits. She began speaking at events and workshops, emphasizing the importance of compassion and the impact of small acts of kindness. Her voice resonated with others in the industry, sparking a movement to redefine customer service as an opportunity to uplift rather than judge. Kindness is a currency that never loses its value, she often said, echoing the words Elon had written in his note to her. We all have the power to make someone's day better, no matter how small the gesture. The ripple effects of Elon's experiment extended far beyond Sophia and the copper elm. Discussions about judgment and empathy found their way into classrooms, boardrooms, and dinner tables. Educators used the story as a teaching tool, encouraging students to reflect on how they treated others. Businesses adopted policies to combat bias, inspired by the lessons learned at the copper elm. As for Elon, he reflected on the experiment with a sense of fulfillment. In a rare interview months later, he spoke about the experience. It reminded me that the smallest actions can reveal the biggest truths, he said. Sophia's kindness was a reminder of what really matters. Treating others with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. Elon's words resonated deeply with audiences, cementing the experiment's place as more than just a viral moment. It became a cultural touchstone, a reminder of the humanity that connects us all. Sophia's story, in particular, continued to inspire, showing how one person's empathy could ignite a global conversation. Years later, Sophia stood in the doorway of her own restaurant, the culmination of years of hard work and determination. The space was warm and inviting, a reflection of the values she had carried with her since that fateful night at the Copper Elm. A small plaque near the entrance bore a simple inscription: in honor of kindness, the most powerful ingredient of all. As customers filled the tables, Sophia moved through the dining room with the same grace and professionalism she had shown that night. Every interaction was a chance to embody the lesson that had changed her life. And though Elon Musk had long since moved on to his next venture, the mark he left on her and the world remained indelible. The aftermath of that night was more than a story. It was a movement, a testament to the idea that kindness, no matter how small, could spark change far greater than anyone could imagine.